The towering 8-foot sovereign of an alien race, Ky'lara, had dismissed the very notion of procreating with a human male as a ridiculous fantasy, a statement she would soon, viscerally, regret. Across the vast, crystalline expanse of the alien world, where the howling solar wind carried stinging, electrostatically charged particles of rime, Commander Kaelen Rourke wrestled with the antiquated, backup manual controls of his shuttle, which was dropping with terrifying velocity. Every structural member of the atmospheric vessel's pressurized hull groaned like a tortured behemoth under the sheer forces of entry, while its primary flight and navigation systems flickered into terminal failure, utterly defeated by the inexplicable quantum interference emanating from the planet's core. "Come on, you piece of junk," he growled, his muscles bunching and straining against the control yoke's violent feedback. Just a little longer. The ground, a churning vista of corrosive white ice broken only by the fractal, dark shapes of chittering flora, rushed up to greet him. The last functioning scramjet engine sputtered, choked, and died just as he managed to stabilize the final descent trajectory, plunging the cockpit into a profound, dreadful silence broken only by the high, metallic whistle of the wind through the newly formed hull fractures. Impact. The violent deceleration hammered him against his 5-point restraints. The crash knocked the breath from his chest. As the screaming of twisted metal subsided, Kaelen found himself inverted, a warm trickle of blood tracing a path from a gash above his eye down his temple. The forward viewport, though webbed with fine, pressurized cracks, had miraculously maintained its integrity, offering him an unsettlingly pristine view of the snow-packed ground just millimeters from his faceplate. "Well," he muttered with an obligatory sigh of human stoicism, releasing the magnetic latch of his harness before dropping heavily to the inverted ceiling, that certainly failed to achieve orbital stability. A rapid triage of the wreckage confirmed that the bulk of his survival cache remained intact, crucially including the complex, articulated exoskeleton of his powered armor, a masterpiece of terrestrial micromachining and kinetic dampening, which would, he calculated, extend his survivability for a crucial window in this lethal environment. Kaelen initiated the intricate donning sequence, leaving his Neuralinked helmet off to manage the suit's limited power matrix, and punched out through the emergency airlock into the alien winter, where the knee-deep, shifting snow and the hyperfrigid wind immediately sliced through his exposed blonde hair like frozen surgical blades. His tactical heads-up display immediately flagged the ambient temperature at a biolethal -40°C. "Mayday, Mayday," he broadcast on all dedicated and emergency frequencies, injecting the coded transmission into the planetary ionosphere. Static was his only, utterly indifferent answer. Then, a chromatic irregularity registered in his peripheral vision, a flicker of violent orange against the overwhelming, blinding white of the landscape. Kaelen spun, the inertial gyros of his suit compensating instantly as his armored hand snapped toward the magnetic lock of his pulse rifle, yet he saw nothing but the skeletal, swaying boughs of the alien trees, their leaves like frozen obsidian shards. He understood the immediate necessity of shelter and resource acquisition. The primary reactor cells of the shuttle were irrevocably fused, and the armored suit's auxiliary battery life would be measured in mere days under these extreme thermal loads. His long-range sensors, operating near the limits of their coherence, indicated a massive geological anomaly approximately 2 kilometers due north, a formation that offered the highest probability of resisting the constant atmospheric erosion. As he commenced the grueling, mechanical process of trekking through the heavy snowpack, Kaelen felt a distinct, almost tactile sensation of being systematically analyzed, a pervasive, alien scrutiny that his combat conditioning instantly translated into active threat parameters, even as his disciplined mind recycled the events that had culminated in this predicament. The Solarian Aegis, his flagship, had been charting the sector when the unique, non-natural energy signature was detected, while prudence dictated a distant, robotic probe. The guiding directive of humanity's accelerated galactic expansion had demanded immediate, high-risk, manned reconnaissance. A sudden, jarring crack of fracturing ice directly behind him caused Kaelen to whirl, the pulse rifle's muzzle already cycling to full charge. This time, the sensation was substantiated. Dominating the glacial vista stood the most architecturally striking alien he had ever registered on any database. She exceeded him in height by almost a full meter, a colossal female form draped in skin the hue of a dying star and crowned by hair like liquid, flowing copper. Her body armor, if the overlapping, chitinous orange scales could be categorized as such, offered minimal physical concealment while paradoxically reinforcing her aura of immense martial authority. She held a composite weapon, an intricate fusion of a close-quarters spear and a volatile plasma accelerator, its lethal tip held in perfect vector towards his power-armored chest. "Well, hello there," Kaelen articulated, maintaining a posture of non-aggressive readiness, his own weapon elevated but not offensively indexed. "I don't suppose a friendly, bi-species diplomatic exchange is currently on the agenda." The alien's eyes, immense golden lenses with vertical, feline pupils, narrowed perceptibly. When she spoke, her voice resonated deeply, a mesmerizing contralto that, to his astonishment, the suit's universal translation matrix processed flawlessly. "You are either demonstrating monumental bravery or unforgivable cognitive failure to enter the sovereign territory of the Kaelen hegemony, human. Would you accept the explanation that I merely committed a navigational error?" He activated his most practiced, disarming smile subroutine. "I am Commander Kaelen Rourke, Exploration Division, at your service." "And you are?" "I am Queen Ky'lara of the Kaelen hegemony." "And you?" She paused, her fascinating golden optics systematically assessing the full-dimensional envelope of his frame, "are my designated prisoner." Kaelen held the easy smile, though the tactical subroutines in his cerebral cortex cycled through thousands of immediate engagement options. "Your Majesty, while I am flattered by the singular attention, I generally prefer a nutrient intake cycle before undergoing capture procedures." A low, complex sound escaped her, a vocalization that his translator tagged as a form of derisive amusement. "Your predicament is immediate, yet your display of typical human bravado is persistent." "Not bravado, Your Majesty, merely adherence to basic social protocols. Furthermore, the designation of capture is technically premature." His suit's advanced analysis package was already mapping the plasma spear's power signature and calculating the dissipation rate through his composite hull. "Although I must confess the available company is significantly more engaging than the wreckage I recently departed." Ky'lara's weapon maintained its rigid, threat level 0 elevation, yet a flicker of genuine curiosity animated her features. "Do you truly intend to leverage charm to circumvent this strategic disadvantage? Our historical data indicated human males were less direct. Did you anticipate locating a compliant female of non-hegemony origin to facilitate your rescue?" "I was, to be absolutely candid, hoping to secure pressurized shelter before the thermal drain rendered me a biological curiosity. The serendipitous presence of a stunning alien queen is simply an unexpected optimization." He directed a calculated gesture toward the exponentially intensifying atmospheric disturbance. "Speaking of which, this localized weather pattern is approaching critical severity. Might I propose we relocate this highly valuable geopolitical discussion to a facility with regulated climate control?" "You dare to initiate a proposition of intimacy with a sovereign ruler?" Her voice was a symphony of contradictory inflections, registering equal parts outrage and genuine, unfeigned interest. "I would not presume, Your Majesty. I am suggesting the tactical superiority of conducting this standoff in an environmentally stable location." A particularly violent gust of wind whipped snow and electrostatic grit between them, and Kaelen noted the almost imperceptible thermal flicker in her armored scales, a confirmation of her vulnerability to the plummeting temperatures. The storm was rapidly approaching conditions lethal even to his armored state. "Your proposal possesses merit," she finally conceded, the word delivered with heavy, regal reluctance. "My outpost is located in the adjacent fault line. You will proceed as my prisoner. I accept the route designation. However, I must pre-warn you that I possess a systemic, near-total inability to consistently adhere to superior rank instruction." As they systematically traversed the terrain, trudging through the ever-deepening snowfield, Kaelen maintained a precise, calculated distance, his bioscanners detailing her gait, a fluid, predatory grace that belied her immense physical density. His suit registered a continuous, high-intensity thermal signature emanating from her, a core temperature approximately 10 degrees Celsius higher than standard terrestrial metabolism. "I must submit," she stated after a period of silent, strained movement, "that you do not conform to the established projections regarding your species' phenotype." And what were the established projections? That I would be dimensionally restricted? Chronically deficient in strength? Possessing a primitive sociological structure? She offered a rare, deliberate sidelong glance. "The data suggested your species possessed a net biopower index barely worthy of planetary subjugation." Kaelen permitted himself a dry, brief chuckle. "Then I propose you immediately initiate a full restructuring of your intelligence network. Humanity's fundamental constant is unpredictable variability. A characteristic I am demonstrably observing." They reached an immense, near-vertical wall of what appeared to be geological bedrock, yet upon Ky'lara's touch, a nearly invisible, pressure-sealed aperture slid open with a controlled hiss. "Although I still harbor significant doubt that your species could pose a viable strategic threat to the Kaelen hegemony. The very conceptualization of propagating life with a human male remains an absurdity." A humorous observation, given the circumstances, Kaelen began, but his rebuttal was instantly annihilated by the deafening percussive report of an external thermobaric detonation. The very mountain structure convulsed violently, and a torrent of ice fragments and pulverized lithic material cascaded down the exposed fault line. Reacting purely on trained kinetic instinct, Kaelen slammed his armored bulk into Ky'lara, driving her through the aperture just as the entrance mechanism fractured and collapsed, hermetically sealing them within. They landed in an entangled, unceremonious pile, his hard-shell combat suit pressed intimately against her substantially taller, scale-armored anatomy. For a single, frozen moment, they stared at each other in the outpost's automatically activated, eerie amber emergency lighting. "Well," Kaelen finally stated, his position unchanged, "it appears we have significantly more time to delve into the finer points of interspecies biological compatibility." The low-level emergency illumination cast a pervasive, ethereal amber glow throughout the core outpost corridors, painting the complex planes of Queen Ky'lara's exotic features in warm, complementary shades. Kaelen meticulously observed her from his position, leaning casually against a primary plasma conduit console, noting how her imposing height required her to occasionally lower her head as she traversed the lower cross-section elements of the command center. "The external communications matrix is terminally compromised," she articulated, a thread of potent frustration woven into her naturally melodic voice. "We are effectively isolated from all external hegemony systems." Kaelen adopted a posture of deliberate, easy relaxation. "An inauspicious development, certainly, but hardly critical. We retain life support and atmospheric regulation." He subtly referenced his internal readouts. "The primary environmental systems remain stable, and I calculate a projected survival window of several weeks based on stored power reserves." Ky'lara rotated to face him, her immense golden eyes gleaming brightly in the dim ambient light. "You exhibit a truly remarkable degree of detachment for an individual currently trapped with a potentially hostile sovereign ruler of a superior galactic power." "The designation has been upgraded to potentially hostile? I categorize that as a net improvement," he grinned. "Furthermore, I have routinely navigated far more demanding strategic environments, though I confess, rarely in such stimulating company." She emitted that characteristic, complex vocalization again, not a true terrestrial laugh, but a near approximation. "You humans, with your perpetual commitment to psychological manipulation through superficial charm. Does this attempt possess a quantifiable probability of success? I find the very suggestion ludicrous." Yet, an almost imperceptible shift in her deep vocal register suggested otherwise. She advanced slowly, closing the intervening space until she loomed directly over him. "While I must concede your presence intrigues me. The majority of sentient species exhibit immediate, predictable behavioral collapse when confronted by the Kaelen hegemony." Kaelen straightened his stance, reducing the imposing dimensional differential between them. "Perhaps those species fail to allocate the requisite time for personalized data gathering. And you, Commander, intend to initiate that data gathering process with me." Her voice descended to a low, dangerous register, a sonic texture that vibrated pleasingly against the air. Given our forced proximity, yes. We are currently sharing a finite ecosystem. It is an optimal environment for maximizing our synergistic efficiency. He directed a calculated gesture at his armored gauntlet. This suit incorporates highly advanced multispectral scanning capabilities. Are you receptive to receiving a comprehensive, near-real-time readout of Solarian cardiovascular physiology? Her eyes compressed into metallic slits. You would dare to conduct a passive biological scan on your captor? Standardized exploration protocol. For example, my current data stream indicates your core body temperature operates at an approximate delta of plus 15 degrees Celsius relative to my own baseline. Moreover, your dual cardiac systems beat in a rhythm that suggests complex neurological processing, and, most intriguingly, your pheromone efflux concentrations show a marked, high-amplitude spike proportional to our physical adjacency. Ky'lara's sunset orange skin visibly intensified in color. Your presumptuousness is geometrically expanding for a designated prisoner. Is that still the designation? I propose co-occupant or reluctant ecological partner as more accurate descriptive terminology. She executed another fractional advance, minimizing the remaining distance until she was examining his features from mere centimeters away. Perhaps I should re-establish the rigid parameters of your current strategic classification. My classification is currently optimal, thank you. His gaze locked precisely onto hers, refusing to fracture. Though, as a point of functional inquiry, I remain receptive to any proposals for operational enhancement. A deep, rumbling sound resonated in her throat, a tonal warning that nonetheless lacked absolute conviction. You are engaging in a highly volatile, life-critical game, human. Kaelen, he corrected, emphasizing the phonetic accuracy. And this is not a game. A palpable, high-energy potential charge saturated the air between them, an electromagnetic field generated by biological proximity rather than by the outpost's failing systems. Ky'lara's hand moved with unexpected, delicate slowness toward his face, her long, segmented fingers tracing the ragged cut above his eye, the gesture possessing a startling tenderness. Your species is defined by its transient fragility, she murmured, the depth of her voice amplified by their closeness. Your life cycle is an insignificant fraction of my own. Yet, this total absence of fear remains anomalous. Should I manifest terror? Affirmatively. Yet her immense form remains stationary, locked in that charged moment. This level of interspecies interaction borders on pure, unpredictable chaos. The very conceptual foundation of our civilizations resists this union. Kaelen extended his own armored hand, the composite alloy shell moving with meticulous care as he brushed a strand of flowing copper hair from her cheek. Occasionally, chaos is the only verifiable constant in the universe. The subsequent collision of their lips, when it finally occurred, was akin to initiating a terminal short-circuit. Her skin radiated intense, captivating thermal energy against his, an utterly alien warmth that was paradoxically, powerfully alluring. Time dilated, its chronological certainty fracturing as they systematically explored this new, forbidden territory, dismantling barriers that should have remained absolute and inviolable. Later, much later, their bodies rested in what served as the outpost's primary regeneration chamber, their thermal signatures gradually synchronizing within the carefully controlled atmospheric envelope. Kaelen utilized his finger to trace complex, mesmerizing patterns across the smooth expanse of her orange skin, analyzing the hypnotic way it seemed to refract the low light. Do you still categorize the concept of propagating life with a human male as absurd? He inquired, a calculated layer of satisfied confidence woven into his vocalization. Ky'lara shifted, propping her massive frame onto one elbow, looking down at him with a complex expression that combined regal amusement with something newly emergent and profound. You have, quite successfully, initiated a fundamental recalibration of my established cognitive parameters. I am perpetually dedicated to advancing the scientific understanding of my species' unique capabilities. She rotated her golden eyes, a surprisingly facile terrestrial gesture. Your self-congratulatory ego remains a quantifiable, persistent variable. a foundational component of my documented charm index. However, understand this. This highly irregular interaction fundamentally alters nothing, she asserted, though the tensile strength had visibly leached from her tone. Upon our retrieval, should such a rescue be technically achievable, this interaction remains strictly classified, confined to this subterranean anomaly. She paused, her gaze distant, contemplative. Although, I propose we conduct further cross-species cultural exchange sessions while the variable of time remains unconstrained. Kaelen's grin widened, a flash of pure human audacity. Executed exclusively for the advancement of empirical science, naturally. For empirical science, she agreed, her voice dropping lower, then hardening abruptly. However, there are non-negotiable biological parameters regarding my species, factors of genetic compatibility, that you must comprehend before she could fully articulate her warning. A deep, grinding seismic event rocked the outpost structure. Warning indicators flashed in urgent, frantic sequences as multiple critical systems reported cascade failures. That energy signature is spiking again, Kaelen stated, the casual tone immediately replaced by sharp, military focus as he reached for his armored suit. Ky'lara was already a fluid motion, her formidable warrior instincts overriding all other protocols. The initial detonation must have initiated a progressive structural instability within the mountain massif. We must immediately. A secondary shockwave impacted, far more severe than the first. Equipment was ripped from its secure mountings as the entire rock edifice seemed to warp under immense, tectonic pressure. Immediate egress is mandated, Kaelen announced, locking his suit into full combat readiness. I require a confirmed navigational path to an emergency surface termination point. A primary maintenance access shaft leads directly to the exterior, but the ceiling plating chose that precise moment to catastrophically fail, raining structural debris onto the command center floor. The vertical maintenance shaft proved to be a geometrically restrictive challenge, particularly for Ky'lara's immense, armored physique. Kaelen assumed the forward position, the high-intensity spectral lamps of his armor illuminating the narrow, cramped passage as they ascended through the grinding, unstable interior of the mountain. "Your Majesty," he called back, his voice crackling slightly over the internal comms. "While the proximity is strategically advantageous, I note a reduction in your standard vocal cadence." "Focus entirely on the ascent, human," she responded, yet her voice lacked the effortless, authoritative imperial certainty he had grown accustomed to. Instead, it was strained, distinctly unfocused. The shaft terminated abruptly at a heavy, reinforced exterior hatch. Kaelen braced his armored shoulders against the cylindrical walls and initiated the manual pressure sequence, the servos in his suit straining under the kinetic resistance until the seal broke with a violent hiss of escaping, pressurized atmosphere. A blinding, frigid blast of hypercooled wind and snow immediately enveloped them as they emerged onto the unstable mountainside. The atmospheric disturbance had escalated to a near-total whiteout, rendering the landscape an impenetrable, chaotic blur. Kaelen's primary tactical overlay registered a further 10 degrees thermal drop. But a far more critical biological variable captured his immediate attention. Ky'lara was vibrating with intense, systemic shivers. "This is physiologically unacceptable," she managed to articulate, attempting to cross her arms across her massive chest. "Solarian organisms we do not exhibit this specific thermal vulnerability." Kaelen's suit diagnostic array immediately shifted to a high-priority analysis of her biovital parameters. "Your core temperature is oscillating non-linearly. We require immediate, stable thermal shelter." He identified a localized, natural geological fault cave nearby and guided her toward it, noting the significant, uncharacteristic reliance on his armored support despite the immense disparity in their physical dimensions. Inside the relative stability of the cave, he manually activated his suit's distress beacon, transmitting a low-frequency, coded pulse, and rapidly began deploying a provisional habitat using materials salvaged from his survival kit. Ky'lara spoke, her voice registering an unprecedented level of uncertainty. "A systemic biological event is currently manifesting within my phenotype." He turned to observe her as she examined her own palm with mesmerizing focus. Her sunset orange skin seemed to be actively pulsating with an intense, internal luminosity, and his suit's embedded sensors began cycling through frantic, high error rate data attempts, unable to coherently categorize the readings. Provide immediate verbal feedback, he commanded, moving closer. Describe the subjective sensory input. The integrated perception is more. Exponentially more. The visible light spectrum is heightened. All somatic sensations are amplified. She looked directly at him, those golden eyes now literally radiating focused light. And there is a distinct presence. Something rapidly achieving self-assembly. Kaelen's suit emitted an urgent, priority 1 notification tone. The processed results of the biological scan caused an abrupt, systemic halt in his respiratory cycle. Ky'lara, based on the combined biometrics, you are currently in an accelerated state of gestation. Carrying a hybrid life form, she finished his clinical statement, her voice an oscillation of intense wonder and utter disbelief. It is genetically untenable. Our species possess no documented compatibility vectors. Evidently, the parameters of our respective deoxyribonucleic acids possessed differing, more ambitious opinions. He reached for her hand, and she instinctively intertwined her immense fingers with his. Are you experiencing any physical duress? A genuine, unsuppressed cascade of laughter erupted from her throat, fundamentally different from the controlled amusement she usually displayed. Duress? I am currently carrying what could be the singular, unprecedented union of human and Solarian genetic material in documented galactic history. My xenotype synod will initiate a collective, systemic neurological shutdown. The biological purists will demand my immediate, violent abdication. And yet, she drew him closer, her free hand tracing the complex curvature of his armor plating. Yet, the analytical portion of my mind is overwhelmed by the sheer, exhilarating scope of this possibility. You exhibit no psychological distress. Distress? She smiled, revealing the slight, sharpened edges of her teeth. My people have dedicated millennia to the belief in our absolute genetic supremacy over all other forms of life. In a single, thermodynamically chaotic night, you have empirically demonstrated that humanity is not merely our tactical equal, but possesses a latent, compatible biological vector. Do you comprehend the tectonic implications of this discovery? I comprehend that I am now officially the most critically pursued individual within the entire Kaelen hegemony. That, Commander, is merely a subset of the consequences. Her expression suddenly sharpened, turning intensely predatory. This signifies fundamental, unpredictable evolution. It is a paradigm shift. It is a future neither of our disparate species could have possibly foreseen. The internal atmospheric temperature of the cave suddenly registered a marked increase. Kaelen's suit helpfully confirmed that Ky'lara's pheromone concentration gradient was once again escalating. Your thermal signature is achieving stability, he noted, attempting to inject a semblance of detached clinical professionalism into the moment. However, a series of comprehensive, controlled diagnostic protocols remains highly advisable, purely as a precautionary measure. Indeed. She pulled his body even closer, her gaze unwavering. Rigorous and extensive diagnostic protocols. A distant, muffled, concussive event interrupted what promised to be a highly unorthodox scientific inquiry. Kaelen's tactical overlay immediately flagged multiple large-scale contacts rapidly converging on their calculated position. We have incoming high-density signatures, he announced. A minimum of 3 independent starships, highly probable that additional vessels are masked by the ionospheric distortion. Ky'lara's expression immediately reverted to the stoic, impenetrable regal mask he had initially encountered. The xenotype synod. They must have detected the localized signature of the outpost's catastrophic collapse. She stood to her full, imposing height, embodying every fractal element of a queen despite her disheveled physical state. They cannot, under any circumstances, discover our collocation. Not yet. Not until I have achieved a stable, predictive understanding of this emergent biological factor. I will not abandon your position. You must comply. She gripped his face between her massive hands. My security forces will adhere to protocol and refrain from inflicting harm upon their sovereign queen, but they possess a high-probability operational directive to neutralize any human entity on site. I require an unconstrained temporal window to prepare my people for this unprecedented reality. Another localized detonation occurred, this one significantly closer. Searchlight energy beams began methodically slicing through the dense, swirling atmospheric particulates. There is a stabilized human colonization zone approximately 2 days' structured journey due south, she continued, her voice rapidly synthesizing a viable strategy. Locate your people. I will establish a secure contact vector when the strategic environment permits. How will you transmit the required data? She compressed a small, highly crystalline structure into his palm, a geometry that pulsed with the identical inner light emanating from her skin. This object will serve as your navigational and communication beacon back to my location. Depart immediately. Kaelen hesitated only for the duration of a single, slow breath, then pulled her down into a demanding, intensely focused kiss. This event does not constitute a final departure. It does not, she confirmed, physically propelling his armored form toward the cave's concealed rear egress. It merely constitutes the Ky'lara ascendant. He activated his suit's full-spectrum stealth and energy-dampening systems and slipped out into the chaotic tempest, just as the leading edge of the first Solarian search party breached the cave's primary entrance. The final coherent audio he registered was Ky'lara's voice, now amplified to an immense, commanding register, delivering a torrent of highly aggressive, authoritative reprimands to her guards for their unforgivable temporal inefficiency in locating their sovereign. As he systematically executed his escape vector southward through the blizzard, Kaelen permitted himself a brief, feral grin. The crystal pulsed rhythmically against his chest plating, and his suit's networked sensors continued to receive a perfectly stable stream of Ky'lara's critical vital signs through their newly established biological tether. Well, he muttered into the controlled atmosphere of his helmet, that represents a statistically significant improvement in human-alien diplomatic relations. 2 full cycles of methodical, rigorous trudging through the alien environment had failed to diminish Kaelen's fundamental, human optimism. The crystalline artifact provided by Ky'lara pulsed with reassuring regularity against his sternum plate, and his suit's networked biomonitors persistently reported stable vital signs for both her and their profoundly improbable hybrid offspring. He reached the apex of a jagged, icy ridge and finally achieved visual acquisition of the human colonization site, Port Alios, confirming the target via his internal nav chart. The settlement, a typical array of modular prefab structures and hastily erected kinetic defense towers, appeared identical to countless other frontier colonies he had previously documented, with one crucial, differentiating characteristic. The entire perimeter was operating under a heightened state of military readiness, preparing for imminent contact. Well, damn, he muttered, visually confirming the patrol routes of numerous armored personnel carriers. His tactical sensor array highlighted the installation of at least 3 long-range planetary defense batteries. The colony's integrated security systems immediately detected his approach vector before he had traversed even half the ridge descent. A full squad of powered armor troops, heavy, mechanized infantry, converged on his position, their plasma pulse rifles cycling to full charge. Commander Rourke, a familiar, non-hostile voice articulated over the external comms frequency. Your status was officially logged as destroyed in action. Commander Anya Vance stepped forward from the formation, her face, etched with the habitual weariness of a seasoned colonial officer, momentarily relaxing into a rare, genuine smile. The Solarian Aegis reported the loss of your deployment shuttle in contested Solarian territory 72 hours ago. The pleasure of your visual acquisition is mutual, Anya. He directed a coded gesture at the intense military buildup. Could you provide immediate clarification on the elevated kinetic threat index? What necessitated the high alert status? Her expression immediately reverted to a grim, professional mask. We need to execute this debriefing within a secure structure. You are going to experience significant cognitive dissonance regarding the current strategic environment. The command center of the colony was a volatile epicenter of activity. Holographic strategic displays projected highly fluid troop movements, detailing both human and Solarian fleet vectors, while intelligence analysts attempted to parse high-volume, encrypted reports. The Kaelen hegemony is currently experiencing a massive systemic destabilization event, Vance elaborated, pulling up a highly classified data stream. Their queen vanished 72 hours ago, precisely coinciding with your shuttle loss. Their military-industrial complex is mobilizing at an alarming rate, and our intelligence suggests a high-probability internal coup is currently in progress. Kaelen maintained a face of disciplined, carefully managed neutrality. Is there any confirmed data regarding the Queen's current location or condition? That is the critical nexus of the information. Vance initiated a playback of a recorded, highly volatile Solarian transmission. According to their own highly fragmented, unencrypted communication channels, Ky'lara is currently in an accelerated state of gestation. The ultra-conservative genetic purists are labeling the hybrid child an abomination. However, a rapidly growing segment of their military establishment is publicly declaring support for her, labeling the pregnancy the next logical stage of Solarian evolution. An interesting philosophical debate, Kaelen commented dryly. The operative threat, however, is localized here. A display projected the immense, armored figure of a Solarian male wearing ornate, high-ranking military regalia. This is High Commander Vorlag. He has effectively disseminated the belief that the Queen was biologically compromised by a human espionage operative, citing the pregnancy as irrefutable evidence of a hostile, bioweapon assault. Kaelen whistled softly, a brief, human articulation of surprise. That's a considerable logical leap to bridge. He is actively leveraging that narrative to justify a full-spectrum preemptive kinetic strike against all forward human colonization efforts, which directly translates to our current operational status. Before Kaelen could synthesize a coherent response, high-priority klaxons began screaming throughout the base structure. A junior communications officer burst into the room, his face pale beneath the environmental lighting. "Commander Vance, we are detecting multiple distinct Starship signatures initiating orbital insertion. It is confirmed Kaelen Royal Guard vessels." Vance immediately snapped her command helmet onto her head. "Initiate battle stations, all defensive units. Hold position." Kaelen immediately raised his armored hands in a gesture of non-engagement. "Permit me to initiate first contact negotiation protocols." "Are you experiencing a mental deficit, Commander?" The command center's immense primary holographic display suddenly pulsed to life, resolving the intricate, awe-inspiring figure of Ky'lara in her full, formal royal regalia. Her orange skin seemed to be actively generating a visible corona of internal thermal energy, and her presence, even projected through the screen, commanded absolute, instantaneous stillness. "People of Port Alios," she announced, her voice resonating with an undeniable frequency of truth. "I am Queen Ky'lara of the Kaelen hegemony. I am requesting immediate, protective asylum." The command center immediately dissolved into a chaotic maelstrom of shouting and frantic activity. Vance delivered rapid-fire tactical orders while analysts struggled to authenticate the unprecedented live transmission. Kaelen simply allowed a slow, knowing smile to settle across his face, feeling the small crystal pressed against his chest plate pulse in perfect synchronicity with his cardiac rhythm. Ky'lara's massive golden eyes found his position in the crowd. "Commander Rourke, I believe a series of highly sensitive diplomatic matters requires our immediate and exclusive attention." "Your Majesty," he advanced, effortlessly dismissing Vance's frustrated, attempted physical interdiction. "I trust your current biological status remains within acceptable operational parameters, improving with every passing solar cycle." Her smile contained volumes of intimate promise, a transmission that caused several junior officers in the room to involuntarily blush. "However, I find myself experiencing a notable deficiency in our previous scientific debates." Before anyone could fully process the loaded implication of that phrase, proximity alert klaxons escalated to ear-splitting intensity. New, highly aggressive contacts resolved on the orbital display, Solarian battleships prominently displaying Vorlag's distinct, factional insignia. "My most dear Queen," a new voice, immense and deeply synthesized, boomed across all established frequencies. High Commander Vorlag's intricately rendered hologram materialized immediately adjacent to Ky'lara's royal figure. What a remarkable synchronicity to locate you in the company of the very human contaminant that facilitated your downfall. The only systemic contamination present, Vorlag, is your adherence to obsolete strategic thinking. Ky'lara's voice dropped in temperature to absolute zero, a tone that could have flash-frozen plasma. Disengage your vessels immediately. I find myself compelled to refuse that command. His holographic smile was a manifestation of pure, predatory intent. The Xenotype Synod has formalized its decree. You will undergo immediate genetic purification protocols, the abomination will be excised, and the entirety of the human vermin population will be systematically terminated. Kaelen advanced even closer to the primary display. Attention, you towering, dramatically lit fascist, the subject of your derogatory description is my abomination. An absolute, profound silence enveloped all frequencies, both internal and external. Vance physically buried her face beneath the specialized composite weave of her command sleeve. Vorlag's holographic face contorted into an expression of utter, visceral violation. Ky'lara's cascade of deep, rich laughter, utterly genuine and unrestrained, fractured the hypertension. Well, my love. I suppose that particular verbal articulation serves as an undeniably efficient formal announcement. You. Vorlag's features twisted into a grotesque mask of apoplectic rage. You would dare to officially confirm, I dare to perform a multitude of actions. Kaelen's grin was rendered with the precision of a cutting laser, including successfully initiating gestation with your queen. It transpires that the fundamental biological parameters of human and Solarian are not, in fact, mutually exclusive. This is physiologically impossible. The empirical evidence suggests otherwise, Ky'lara smoothly countered, one massive hand resting openly and possessively upon her midsection. Our developing child represents the totality of your most profound anxieties, Vorlag, systemic change, necessary evolution, and the irrefutable dissolution of your cherished genetic purity. And, let me provide additional clarity on the strategic environment. Her golden eyes actively radiated a focused thermal energy. A significant fractional majority of the total fleet has already declared its support for my sovereignty. How many dedicated vessels remain under your direct, unauthorized command? As if orchestrated for maximum dramatic effect, a swarm of new, high-density tactical signatures resolved on the orbital display, Solarian battleships dropping from the vacuum of hyperspace, their hulls displaying the Queen's sovereign, loyalist colors. Final communication, Vorlag, Kaelen articulated, his voice amplified to carry conviction. Disengage and submit, or prepare to undergo the comprehensive kinetic assessment that humans are globally notorious for. The strategic standoff endured for 3 tense cardiac cycles before Vorlag's remaining vessels initiated the powering sequence for their primary weapon systems. Your decision is regrettable. Ky'lara sighed with theatrical weariness. Commander Rourke, are you now prepared to assist your queen in neutralizing this localized factional rebellion? Kaelen systematically flexed the hydraulic mechanisms of his gauntlets. I find myself compelled to accept your generous offer, Your Majesty. The subsequent kinetic exchange above Port Alios unfolded with the breathtaking, lethal symmetry of a dark ballet. Vorlag's secessionist forces, though strategically and numerically disadvantaged, fought with the desperate, predictable fury of fanatical zealots. However, their strategic model had entirely failed to factor in one crucial, emergent variable, the unpredictable, adaptive genius of human asymmetrical warfare, directly integrated with the overwhelming, heavy kinetic application of pure Solarian martial superiority. Kaelen stood upon the primary bridge of Ky'lara's command flagship, the star-forged blade, his presence coordinating the joint operational parameters of both fleets. His human combat suit seamlessly networked with the immense, complex Aurelian tactical systems, a technical feat achieved through a frantic series of improvised software patches and a profound, intuitive connectivity he strongly suspected was facilitated by his recently established biological tether to the Queen. Your application of conventional fleet tactics is demonstrably unconventional, Ky'lara observed from the immense curvature of her command throne, watching Kaelen direct starships in complex, high-energy attack patterns that caused her veteran tactician to experience systemic neurological overload. Humans possess a demonstrated biological advantage in cognitive adaptation and lateral problem-solving, he replied, his armored fingers dancing across the holographic command console interfaces. For example, incoming hostile torpedo launch in the 070 vector. The star-forged blade violently shuddered as Vorlag's flagship executed a full-spread barrage of high-yield plasma torpedoes. Before the veteran Solarian gunnery crew could compute a viable interception solution, Kaelen had already calculated and executed a sequence of kinetic dampener pulses that utilized the enemy's own warp field distortions to vector the torpedoes back into their own shielding envelope. Quantifiably impressive, Ky'lara purred, a sound that resonated with primal satisfaction. Then, without warning, she inhaled sharply, both hands pressing violently against her midsection. Kaelen was instantly at her side, his suit's diagnostic systems overriding all other protocols. Specify the nature of the biological trauma. The offspring, her golden eyes dilated with intense wonder and palpable fear. The gestational cycle is progressing at an exponentially accelerated, non-linear rate. The combined genetic matrix appears to have initiated an unpredictable, runaway developmental sequence. A medical officer rushed forward with portable bioscanning equipment, but Ky'lara delivered a sharp, dismissive wave. My parameters are stable. The sensation is immense, but not acutely painful. She registered Kaelen's expression of intense concern and offered a reassuring, yet fatigued smile. Your progeny is exhibiting the same characteristics of reckless impatience as its paternal source, my love. My queen, her chief advisor interrupted, his voice laced with urgency. We are receiving uncontrolled, high-volume transmissions from every major system in the hegemony. The confidential details of your condition have achieved systemic broadcast. Optimal. Ky'lara rose to her full, commanding height, her immense frame somehow radiating even greater authority despite the visibly accelerated gestation. Initiate a full-spectrum, non-encrypted broadcast channel to all available frequencies, both human and Solarian. The bridge personnel executed the complex command sequence under extreme pressure. Kaelen moved to a position of support beside her, noting the slight, instinctive lean of her body toward his armored frame. People of the Kaelen hegemony, she began, her voice imbued with the monumental weight of millennia of sovereignty, and esteemed governmental representatives of humanity. You are currently viewing what was universally labeled as impossibility, the profound union of our disparate species. This covenant was formed not through the cold, calculated variables of warfare or formal diplomatic treaty, but through the elemental, unpredictable force of love. Vorlag's furious, digitized voice sliced across the interfleet comms channels. This is nothing more than deliberate, manipulative propaganda. The human vermin have corrupted our queen with their, "Oh, for the love of the cosmos, shut down your obsolete diatribe." Kaelen physically overrode the transmission lock. You are demonstrably displaying profound jealousy because you lacked the creative initiative to conceive of this action first. Scattered, nervous laughter echoed across the combined fleet frequencies, effectively destabilizing the high-tension environment. The established operational constants are irreversibly shifting, Ky'lara continued, her voice regaining its immense power. Evolution mandates this systemic change. My child, our collective offspring, represents the totality of your entrenched fear, Vorlag, unpredictable change, the inevitability of evolution, and the definitive termination of your antiquated concept of genetic purity. And is that not the crucial point? Her golden eyes blazed with intense thermal energy. I possess the loyalty of the core faction fleet. Your command authority is dissolving rapidly. Kaelen's suit registered another intense spike in her biometric readings, accompanied by a sharp, audible grimace. The gestational cycle is achieving an exponential curve, the medical officer whispered in a low-frequency channel. We are measuring the remaining process in minutes, not months. Then we must execute the terminal phase of this operation with extreme temporal efficiency, Kaelen muttered under his breath. Then, addressing the combined fleet via his suit's amplified comms, attention, all sovereign and loyalist vessels. Your queen is currently initiating the birthing sequence for the first definitive human-Solarian hybrid life form in history. Any entity harboring residual tactical or philosophical objections may address them directly to me. As an advisory note, my operational history is characterized by a statistically significant success rate in defying established improbability. The crystal artifact against his chest pulsed with violent, internal heat, and Kaelen felt a distinct resonance of Ky'lara's amusement through their neural link. "Your flair for the dramatic remains insufferable," she whispered in a tone of weary affection. Then she violently doubled over as a massive contraction cycle initiated. "My queen!" Several officers immediately moved to provide physical assistance, but Kaelen was faster, effortlessly utilizing his armor's full lift capability to scoop her immense frame into his arms. "Designate the medical bay," he commanded. "Immediate traversal." "But the kinetic engagement," she protested weakly. "It is strategically inconsequential until this biological process is complete." He fixed his chief advisor with a clear, absolute directive. "You now possess full operational command. Ensure Vorlag is strategically contained, but make a concerted effort to avoid his complete termination. He may serve a useful function as a political deterrent." The advisor executed a deep, formal bow. "As you command, my lord." Kaelen grinned broadly as he carried Ky'lara from the bridge. "We will allocate appropriate time to finalize the precise parameters of my noble title later. Currently, I possess a crucial, high-priority engagement with the metaphysical variables of destiny within the confines of the delivery facility." "You are deriving excessive enjoyment from this situation," Ky'lara grumbled weakly against his neck plating. "A demonstrable necessity, considering the source of the biological anomaly once publicly ridiculed the very notion of propagation with a human male." "I find myself compelled to admit that my laughter is currently absent," he agreed, feeling the crystal pulse in absolute synchronicity with both their hearts and a third, newly emergent, chaotic variable. "However, I possess absolute certainty that our offspring will possess an unparalleled, sardonic sense of humor." Behind them, the strategic fleet engagement continued its deadly permutation, but within the hermetically sealed, clinically sterile environment of the Starforged Blade's medical bay, a fundamentally different kind of evolutionary history was rapidly approaching its singularity, one that was poised to irrevocably reconfigure the trajectory of two galactic species. The medical personnel, a rapidly assembled and highly stressed team of human and Solarian biological specialists, frantically prepared for an event that possessed no empirical precedent. Their instrumentation registered thermal and energy readings that exceeded all established safety thresholds, as if the very fabric of local spacetime was holding its breath in fearful anticipation. "I must state for the record," Kaelen observed, maintaining a constant, fierce grip on Ky'lara's hand as the multinational medical team executed their critical procedures, "that this is not the conventional manner in which I had mentally prepared to interface with your extended biological family." Her groan of pain, translated into sound, quickly became a desperate laugh as the accelerated gestational cycle reached its climax. "When this volatile process concludes, I will dedicate a measurable portion of my lifespan to ensuring your punitive psychological and physical recompense for every single instance of your inappropriate jesting. This is a solemn promise." Her statement was abruptly truncated by a sudden, immense neurological sensation that caused every single illumination source in the medical bay to violently flicker. The crystalline artifact between them pulsed with an intense, blinding energy release. "Ah," Ky'lara exhaled on a single, strained breath. "This particular variable is demonstrably progressing toward the intensely interesting phase." The pristine, highly filtered atmosphere of the medical bay began to physically thrum with the sheer output of chaotic energy as Ky'lara's labor progressed at its impossible, hyper-accelerated rate. Kaelen had established an unyielding physical presence at her side, his combat suit's integrated sensors feeding critical, real-time physiological data to the assembled, deeply fascinated medical personnel who watched the irreversible unfolding of history before their eyes. "My queen," a highly agitated aide burst through the sealed doors. "High Commander Vorlag has successfully penetrated the defensive perimeter. He is initiating a full-scale boarding action on the flagship." Kaelen's primary tactical display immediately highlighted multiple hostile energy signatures rapidly vectoring through the internal decks of the star-forged blade. Naturally he is, Kaelen articulated with profound resignation, because the current strategic environment was apparently insufficient in terms of sheer excitement. Ky'lara's massive hand clamped down on his armored forearm with a physical strength that would have pulverized unshielded bone. Go! Terminate his advance. Ensure the absolute protection of our child. I will not intentionally vacate your position. You possess no choice. She pressed the violently pulsing crystal deeper into his gauntlet. The neural and biological tether is now complete, remember? Furthermore, her golden eyes flickered with a raw, primal amusement despite the overwhelming discomfort. I harbor a strong desire to observe you applying that highly vaunted human ingenuity against that pompous, genetically obsessed adversary. The immense vessel shuddered violently from a series of internal, kinetic explosions. Kaelen's internal display confirmed Vorlag's heavy infantry forces were rapidly converging on the medical bay's precise location. Doctor, he addressed the chief medical officer, provide a hard estimate for the terminal sequence. Minutes, at most. The energy signatures are exceeding all established parameters. Kaelen executed a deep, profound kiss with Ky'lara, then sprang to his full height. Preserve that thought, Your Majesty. I have an exceptionally rapid external chore to execute. Ensure you minimize the material damage to my flagship, she called after his retreating form. I offer no guarantees. The pressurized corridor immediately outside the medical bay was already a dynamic kill zone. Kaelen initiated the high-pressure sealing sequence on the doors behind him and activated his suit's total engagement combat protocols. The crystal, now integrated directly into his gauntlet, resonated with a powerful, consistent hum, a frequency that somehow amplified his neural-linked connection to the suit's processing matrix. Attention, all operational personnel, he broadcast on a ship-wide frequency. This is Commander Rourke. We have several uninvited guests attempting to disrupt a highly sensitive, critical biological delivery. Let us demonstrate the core tenets of human battlefield courtesy. The response was immediate, cohesive, and overwhelming. Both human expeditionary forces and loyalist Solarian crew members immediately coalesced, systematically coordinating their tactical efforts through Kaelen's shared networking capability. Vorlag's fanatic forces found themselves unexpectedly confronted by a volatile, unpredictable fusion of human-style improvised guerrilla tactics and the crushing, sustained kinetic application of pure Solarian martial prowess. Your localized resistance is tactically impressive, Vorlag's magnified voice boomed threateningly through the ship's structure, but strategically and biologically futile. The abomination must not be allowed to achieve birth. You know, Kaelen responded, rapidly deploying a series of custom-detonating, shape-charge explosives. For an individual so fundamentally obsessed with your species' genetic integrity, you dedicate a statistically disproportionate amount of vocal effort to discussing my child. Are you perhaps experiencing latent psychological inadequacy? The calculated taunt achieved its desired, volatile effect. Vorlag's lead troops fractured their disciplined formation, charging forward with reckless, fanatical aggression directly into Kaelen's meticulously prepared kill zone. The subsequent explosions were meticulously calibrated for maximum kinetic disruption rather than lethal termination, designed exclusively to herd the attackers into a precise, confined area. Throughout the chaotic exchange, the crystal pulsed with increasing, blinding intensity, and Kaelen felt Ky'lara's immediate, neurological presence growing exponentially more powerful in his mind. An immense, chaotic energy began to accumulate, a pure, unfocused potential that felt akin to the pre-static energy preceding a catastrophic lightning strike. My lord, a Solarian security officer transmitted, the honorific still sounding alien and unfamiliar, High Commander Vorlag is rapidly approaching the medical bay via the tertiary access shaft. Optimal, Kaelen grinned savagely. His vector is precisely where I calculated the intersection point to be. He achieved the medical bay's secondary entrance just as Vorlag, the immense Solarian commander, burst through the pulverized bulkheads, his elaborate, ceremonial battle armor rendered momentarily ineffective. Stand aside, human! Vorlag bellowed, his voice filled with visceral, consuming hatred. This confrontation is far beyond the scope of your species' capabilities. On the contrary, Kaelen drawled, allowing a measured pause for dramatic effect, I maintain that this nexus point is the exact, deterministic location I was always intended to occupy. You inquire as to why your primitive attempts at, because, Kaelen continued, confirming that the crystal's hyperpulse had achieved absolute synchronization with the flagship's fluctuating power grid. My offspring is currently initiating one hell of a definitive cosmic introduction. The medical bay doors violently imploded in an absolute, eye-searing flash of white gold light. Raw, unfocused energy cascaded through the corridor like molten starfire, and in the immediate aftermath, the fundamental geometry of reality appeared to visibly warp. Kaelen experienced the event first through his established neural link with Ky'lara, a new, vast consciousness, geometrically powerful and pristine, representing the perfect, unpredicted synthesis of both species' genetic material. The crystalline artifact in his hand violently detonated, its total energy signature merging instantaneously with the cosmic phenomenon. When the blinding residual light finally dissipated, Vorlag stood frozen in place, his massive armor systems completely inert, paralyzed by the incomprehensible energy release. Immediately behind Kaelen, cradled gently in Ky'lara's massive arms, their child radiated an intense, internal luminosity that rendered the light of the stars utterly trivial by comparison. Well, Kaelen finally stated into the immense, stunned silence, that particular biological anomaly definitely inherited my hair texture. The infant, a perfect, miraculous fusion of human and Solarian biological characteristics, slowly opened its eyes, the irises shifting dynamically between the deep, familiar blue of Earth and a terrifyingly beautiful shade of molten gold. Every piece of complex electronic hardware aboard the star-forged blade instantaneously responded to its mere passive presence, systems diagnostics reading an immediate, unprompted self-upgrade and rapid evolutionary parameter adaptation. This is a statistical impossibility, Vorlag whispered, his voice stripped of all pretense of authority. You consistently employ that particular terminology, Ky'lara responded, her voice thick with exhaustion but ringing with profound, undeniable triumph. I posit that the concept no longer maintains its previously established semantic meaning. The flagship's primary communications array suddenly initiated a full-spectrum, uncontrolled broadcast, projecting a live image feed of the hybrid child onto every available screen and frequency within the system, its impossibly beautiful, hybrid nature rendered irrefutable and unavoidable. This represents the next evolutionary step, Kaelen realized, the profound weight of the statement causing an involuntary tremor in his suit. Not simply for our individual species, but for the totality of local spacetime. Ky'lara delivered a slight, regal nod. Evolution mandates fundamental paradigm shifts. Vorlag, you are presented with a binary choice, either you execute immediate biological and cognitive adaptation, or you accept the terminal fate of extinction. The deposed commander slowly lowered his massive gaze, examining the child, then its two unprecedented parents, and finally his own useless, paralyzed armor systems. With a low, guttural exhalation, he sank to one knee. My queen, he articulated, his voice choked with raw, unexpected emotion. I was fundamentally incorrect in my assessment. Affirmatively, she conceded. Your assessment was erroneous. But that is arguably the crucial lesson for all species present. We were collectively wrong to assume our respective evolutionary peaks had been achieved in isolation. It required human audacity and Solarian pride to illuminate the superior path. Kaelen moved to her side, his armored hand gently tracing the perfect, emergent features of their daughter. So, about the discussion regarding my previously deferred noble titles. Do not attempt to push your current statistical advantage, Commander. As you command, Your Majesty, he grinned. Though I strongly suggest that we have collectively advanced beyond the necessity of formal, archaic nomenclature. The infant life form emitted a sound that was immediately translated as a resonant, perfect laugh, and every illumination source aboard the flagship pulsed in ecstatic response. I must submit, Kaelen added, that we are still required to assign a formal designation to our new, localized reality warper. Ky'lara's fierce expression softened with maternal warmth as she gazed at their child. In the long-established Solarian tradition, life forms of monumental historical significance are designated with the categorical nomenclature of the moment of their emergence. And how would you categorize this precise, pivotal moment? She smiled, the expression radiating pure, unfiltered power. The Ky'lara Ascendant. 3 predictable solar cycles subsequent to the catastrophic birth event, Kaelen found himself meticulously adjusting the complex fastenings of his formal diplomatic attire within the confines of their private royal chambers aboard the star-forged Blade. The suit, a highly advanced textile designed to both aesthetically complement Solarian formal wear and simultaneously retain the rigid dignity of the human military caste, felt unnervingly lightweight compared to the familiar, comforting density of his combat armor. Are the restrictive parameters of the ceremonial collar proving challenging, my love? Ky'lara's resonant, amused voice originated from the doorway. She stood framed in the aperture, resplendent in her traditional, ceremonial royal regalia, their child held securely in one immense arm. Attempt to effectively engage these microclasps when they have been dimensionally optimized for an 8-foot-tall, non-terrestrial anatomy, he grumbled with calculated good nature. She glided forward, utilizing her free hand to execute a precise, expert adjustment of his collar's intricate mechanism. Such frivolous complaints from the individual who reportedly exhibited no difficulty in successfully navigating the more complex, undocumented physiological aspects of Solarian anatomy. That specific operational challenge possessed a fundamentally different motivational vector. He grinned up at her immense height. My task focus was categorized as extremely high priority. Their child, formerly designated a loner starfire but affectionately nicknamed Elia by the human auxiliary crew, emitted a sharp, high-frequency giggle, and every passive electronic device in the chamber responded with an immediate, measurable fluctuation. At 3 months post-birth, she already manifested the perfect, unpredicted synthesis of the best traits of both species. Ky'lara's striking, vibrant orange skin tone and cascading copper hair, combined with Kaelen's deep-set blue eyes and characteristic, determined human jawline. Her vertical growth rate was proceeding at an exponential curve, significantly exceeding human developmental parameters, though still measured below the full Solarian maturation rate. The scheduled diplomatic summit is commencing in 1 standard hour, Ky'lara reminded him, her gaze penetrating. Are you cognitively prepared to execute the planned, intentional scandalization of the conservative factional representatives? Me? I was under the impression that you were the sovereign ruler who publicly informed the entirety of the Solarian High Council that human males possess an unexpectedly high degree of physiological adaptability. He executed a deliberate elevation of his eyebrows while directing his attention at the known former suitors present in the chamber. She laughed, the sound still transmitting a pleasurable thermal shock wave through his nervous system. I was merely disseminating verifiable, empirical data. Furthermore, the total documented number of human Solarian pairing requests has successfully tripled since that initial public disclosure. Yes, regarding that documented phenomenon. Kaelen received Elia from her arms, experiencing a familiar sense of marvel as their daughter immediately initiated a low-level power shunt with his suit's latent systems. Was it absolutely necessary to broadcast the quantifiable metrics of my personal, impressive endurance to the entire Imperial Court? Would you have preferred that I deliberately misrepresented the factual data? She executed a smooth movement, bending her immense frame to kiss him, an action that physically emphasized their height differential. Besides, it remains a critical political imperative for our combined people to comprehend the undeniable advantages of genetic diversity. A diplomatic aide's digitized voice accessed the private comms channel, the protocol clearly indicating a conscious avoidance of an in-person interruption, a learned avoidance pattern established after witnessing multiple unscripted diplomatic discussions between the royal couple. My queen, my lord, the scheduled delegations are now completing their arrival protocols. The mandatory social obligation is upon us. Kaelen carefully handed Elia back to Ky'lara. Are you ready to display the definitive, crystallized future of the galactic community? With you, Commander, the variable of always is an absolute. The primary diplomatic chamber of the star-forged blade had undergone extensive, deliberate structural and environmental modification to comfortably and equally accommodate both the human and Solarian delegations. The visual observation of the mixed-species crew operating with seamless, integrated efficiency still elicited gasps of astonishment from newly arrived representatives. As they executed their grand entrance, Kaelen immediately registered several distinct phenomena. The appreciative, focused scrutiny directed at him by the combined female attendees of both species, the thinly masked, raw envy radiating from various high-ranking male dignitaries, and the visible, steadfast loyalty displayed by Vorlag, now their most potent political advocate, who stood rigidly at attention. Distinguished representatives of Earth and the Kaelen hegemony, Ky'lara's voice projected effortlessly through the vast chamber. We convene this summit today not merely to formalize a political and military alliance between our two civilizations, but to celebrate a covenant built upon a foundational principle far more potent than pure strategy. Indeed, Ky'lara's golden eyes sparkled with undeniable, predatory mischief. As I am fully certain many of you have received highly detailed external reports, the established biological compatibility between our two distinct species has proven to be, statistically speaking, remarkable. A visible, charged ripple of simultaneous murmuring and electric tension propagated through the assembled crowd. In the brief 3 months since Elia's unprecedented birth, dozens of cross-species relationships had already rapidly matured, each resulting in uniquely gifted, viable offspring. The conservative factions were rendered utterly incapable of refuting the highly quantifiable benefits, massively enhanced technological interface capabilities, accelerated neurocognitive development, and an unprecedented degree of hybrid genetic stability. The outdated, pejorative anecdotes concerning the human male's dimensional inadequacy are now, officially and irreversibly, retired from the diplomatic discourse, one particularly audacious Solarian noble announced, eliciting ripples of knowing, appreciative laughter throughout the chamber. Kaelen elevated a questioning eyebrow in Ky'lara's direction. Should I develop a measurable, professional concern regarding the sheer volume of your population who now possess empirical, personal verification of that claim? Jealousy, my dear love? Of those strategically insignificant variables? Never! His grin morphed into a feral, wicked expression. They are not the entity who successfully initiated the biological process that caused the Queen of the Kaelen hegemony to vocally articulate my name in 3 distinctly different, non-hegemony languages. The chamber's ambient noise level instantly spiked, dissolving into a chaotic fusion of audible gasps, nervous laughter, and a highly measurable increase in interested, conspiratorial murmurs. Elia, their daughter, chose that precise moment of peak dramatic tension to demonstrate her emergent abilities by generating a highly detailed, volumetric holographic projection of her parents' initial, catastrophic shuttle crash, though mercifully omitting the subsequent, highly classified private moments. As is now visually demonstrated, Ky'lara recovered with flawless, regal composure. Our daughter possesses her father's inherent, problematic talent for maximizing dramatic temporal advantage. The subsequent diplomatic discussions were unlike any event previously documented in galactic history. Traditional, rigid boundaries of cultural and political propriety were systematically dismantled as both species embraced the emergent, chaotic reality of their new status. The overwhelming visual symbolism of their hybrid offspring, casually manipulating advanced technological constructs while simultaneously alternating between pure human infant vocalizations and aggressive Solarian war chants, became the definitive, potent emblem of their unified future. You know, Kaelen whispered to Ky'lara during a brief, authorized recess, when my shuttle executed its uncontrolled descent onto your planet, I possessed zero predictive expectation of irrevocably altering the socio-political trajectory of 2 galactic civilizations. No, she confirmed, her finger tracing a possessive, deliberate line down the composite plating of his chest, a gesture that made his formal attire feel abruptly, uncomfortably warm. What were your predictive expectations? Honestly, my primary operational objective was simply to achieve winter cycle survival. Instead, I successfully survived the most complex, formidable challenge of my entire life, you. Her smile once again took on that original, predatory quality. However, the current solar cycle is still young, my profoundly bold human. Vorlag selected that moment to approach them, carrying several high-priority, encrypted documents requiring their immediate sovereign assent. He executed an abrupt, complete halt upon witnessing their intimate proximity. My queen, my lord, I propose a highly efficient temporal displacement and return later. Utter nonsense. Ky'lara straightened to her full, immense height, though her hand remained possessively anchored to Kaelen's shoulder. We were merely engaged in a highly detailed discussion regarding the intricate variables of human-Solarian diplomatic relations, specifically their execution protocols. Kaelen added with helpful, pointed innocence. Vorlag's facial expression clearly communicated a profound, retrospective regret for his previous tactical opposition to their union, primarily because it now necessitated his regular, unwilling observation of their openly unprofessional, blatant physical flirting. The Xenotype Synod has submitted their latest comprehensive findings report, he articulated, his professionalism rigidly enforced. It confirms that the measurable success rate of human-Solarian pairings demonstrates a statistically significant increase proportional to emotional compatibility. Is that the designated scientific terminology for the observed correlation? Kaelen inquired with relentless, feigned naivety. I believe the human sociobiological phrase is sexual chemistry, Ky'lara supplied, her tone causing Vorlag to visibly struggle to maintain his absolute composure. Elia emitted a cascade of happy, rhythmic burbles in her mother's arms, simultaneously initiating a small, localized light show that immediately commanded the attention of the surrounding diplomatic personnel. The child's unique, composite powers grew exponentially with every passing hour, a relentless acceleration matched only by her personality, a precise, perfect amalgamation of human adaptable resilience and Solarian intrinsic pride. To contemplate, Ky'lara mused aloud, that the totality of this galactic shift occurred because your vessel experienced an unscheduled terminal descent onto my planet. It remains, statistically, the finest crash landing in the documented history of human space exploration. Kaelen wrapped a possessive arm around her immense waistline, securing it at the maximum height achievable. Although I still maintain the hypothesis that you were executing a detailed physical examination of my form prior to making the sovereign decision to take me prisoner. I was objectively assessing an emergent, potential threat profile. Is that the revised human semantic for it now? Their continuous, playful interaction was briefly interrupted by the convergence of additional diplomatic contingents, all desperately eager to initiate formal discussions regarding the unprecedented possibility of expanding human-Solarian relational vectors into their own respective star systems. The future stretched before them, a dazzling, unpredictable canvas of potential, charged with the immense, unpredictable energy of the chemistry that had already fundamentally reconfigured the galaxy once. And within the epicenter of this monumental historical event, their daughter continued her accelerated growth, a living, potent testament to the chaotic, brilliant possibilities that emerge when a sovereign ruler dares to laugh at the conceptual fragility of impossible things.